All right, to this story now. Only 16 of the candidates nominated for the ANC's top 6 position have produced financial records. Now, this is according to the party's Electoral Committee. Guidelines state that all candidates must submit detailed financials to the committee head. That's Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe. Now, to discuss this further, we're joined by Chief Matsila. Chief Matsila, good morning, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for the time, too.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, as a start, you were set up in terms of the 54th National Conference resolution. Now, you've come a long way in managing the electoral process thus far. You've just released the top 6 candidates for us. Just talk to us about how difficult or easy the process has been.
Thank you very much. As you rightfully say, the Electoral Committee is a structure that has been established by the NEC following that conference in Nasrec, the 54th conference, which said that there must be a permanent electoral committee to set the rules for the election of leaders within the ANC. And that applies from the NEC down to the branch level. It has been quite a daunting task to really set the rules, because once the rules are proposed by the Electoral Committee, they have to be approved by the National Executive Committee. And we started our work with the local government election process, where we're dealing with candidates that were being nominated to be councillors of the ANC across the country. That was a difficult process, and we had a dispute resolution process, which is very strict in terms of the rules to be followed. That itself really ensured that we streamline our processes and rules. And now we are now seized with a very serious, important matter of setting the rules and ensuring that there is compliance with the rules and the ANC Constitution when leaders are elected this year in December at Nasrec.
Okay, so you're essentially the rule maker and referee in this instance. That would be the simplest term we could use.
Yes, and we are not the players.
Yes, most certainly not the players.
That's right.
Now, speaking of the players, we understand that there are those that haven't submitted their financials as yet, particularly from those 16 who are now have already been announced. What are some of the reasons they've furnished for the delay?
I think when the Electoral Committee served all candidates who are campaigning and their campaign teams with a letter that says we require financial disclosures and declarations, there were some who were very quick to give us the information, and others opted to wait to be nominated, so that after they are nominated, the process is that you accept the nomination. Is then that some comrades were saying that will then declare once we have accepted nomination. We are now at a stage where we are expecting more to declare, since they've now accepted the nomination. I'm sure they are compiling their statements so that we can scrutinize such.
Now, you've committed that by next week, if I'm correct, you'll now be unveiling or releasing the additional. So that will be the 200, I gather.
Yes, it will be the 200, and that is the outcome of the provincial consolidation. As you would know, every branch is required to nominate at most 80 additional nominees for additional members, and then we collate that, consolidate that into a national list of 200, and those 200 will be presented before conference through a ballot, so that 80 additionals could come out of that, and then you have the total 86 members of the National Executive Committee.
Now, remind us of the criteria. Many journalists would be aware, having attended a number of your conferences now, just to take them through the criteria. But remind us of the criteria, because there are letters circulating now around disputes that were allegedly sent to the committee. One in particular is that of Ms. Sisulu, where she states that she actually doesn't understand how it came about that for the post of president, there were only 2 candidates as opposed to the 3. Perhaps it would be important for even those at home that might now have a perception of the committee and assume that maybe it's not running its affairs fairly. So just remind us of the criteria, particularly the 2 pertaining to the highest in the province and then being among the top 3 overall.
No, and I think we should start with the emphasis that the Electoral Committee is not a player, which means that it does not really tamper with the branch nominations that come from the branches. So in that regard, it's important that we trace the whole process, so that we can avoid such misconceptions and miscomprehension as contained in the letter, in the sense that At the branch level, there is an electoral committee that oversees the process of election of the delegate and the nomination of the candidates. Once that has happened, the information is then deposited into the provincial office, where we have a nominations administrator in the office of the provincial secretary. Now, with respect to the candidates for the top 6 positions, we have contracted the services of an independent electoral agency called Elections. And then Elections dispatched its own electoral officers to the provincial offices to capture the nomination packages from the branches in front of the provincial secretaries and regional secretaries who were observers, to ensure that the whole capturing, it's a fair process and a transparent one. When that has been after that has happened, then we do the consolidation, which then generate the numbers that you see. Now, in terms of that, clearly the nomination starts with the branches, with the branch members.
Yes.
And the province is nominating. Now, it means that those who are nominating could then raise objections to say that your results arising from the top 6 announcements is not correlating with what we nominated. But the most important aspect is that for anybody to be presented before conference through a ballot for the top 6 positions to succeed, you have to be elected or proposed by a province.
Yes.
What do we mean by that? We mean that you should have received at least the highest nominations by one of the provinces, which are 9, or the leagues. If you do that, if you meet the criteria stipulated in Rule 12.7.1 of the ANC Constitution. Now, then there is a sub-rule, 12.7.1.1, which then says that if you fail to be nominated through that rule that I've mentioned, you can then be nominated on the conference floor. And that nomination can be proposed by a delegate from any province. Then the presiding officer will then call for seconders of that nomination. So if the nomination is seconded by 25% of the voting delegates at conference, it can then make it to the ballot. Now, in the case of Comrade Lindiwe Sisulu, she invokes that clause of a 25% threshold prematurely so, because it only applies when we're at conference. Now, if
which was quite confusing in the letter, because one then assumed that if she talks of 25%, and we've got some of the nominees there that got 397 nominations, then there creates a confusion, and one had to go back and look at the Constitution to say, what exactly does it say? Because now it doesn't make sense.
Yes, so that's why I'm mentioning that the 25% threshold rule in terms of the ANC Constitution
applies to the floor at the conference.
So it's important that leaders read the ANC Constitution before they can make such spurious allegations, because it's not acceptable to do that when you don't read the Constitution. Now, when we look at the numbers, so her own numbers nationally consolidated do not even make 3%.
Yes, actually.
So that 25% is not even factual or statistical, because she does not even say how many branches nominated. So if you question numbers, you must also bring numbers so that we can balance the situation. Now, if what we are saying in terms of the Constitution, that for you to be nominated successfully, you have to be proposed by a province, which means receiving highest nominations in a particular province. If that is the case, then there are 2 candidates, for instance, in the position of the president, where provinces only nominated 2 candidates, which means that the other Rule 8.3, which refers to, does not apply. If you only have 2 candidates, you can't use it. But if you have more than 3 candidates, that's when the top 3 issue applies. And then the other 9.2, which talks about presenting top 3 at conference, is dependent on successful nomination by provinces. If provinces nominate less, we have less. And therefore, as the Electoral Committee, we can't arbitrarily include a 3rd candidate, because we're then violating Rule 1.3, which says that the Electoral Committee does not elect or select leaders, which she states in a letter, but she states it out of context.
She did quote it that you guys remain the rule maker and referee in this instance. But then now she also goes on to state that she actually has proof of the numbers she in fact got at the branches, because she had individuals that were keeping record as and when she was nominated. Has she produced those to you at this point?
No, that is our concern, that she makes all those allegations without submitting proof. You see, the right way would have been to invoke an internal process which is available of raising disputes in the ANC, which is where we say, if you are concerned, you raise an objection or a dispute following the rules, and you do that in writing, but you must support evidence.
In fairness, she did. I mean, the letter seems to have been leaked, but it was addressed to the African National Congress. So would that be...
The most important issue is when you raise allegations, you must support that with evidence. If you don't support your allegations with evidence, then that is not helpful. It just becomes a question of casting aspersions on the whole process without any evidence whatsoever, and that can't be acceptable. Which
is worrisome if there's going to be any doubt cast on this process, because I was even speaking to Begim Tolo that this is not just a process that is monitored by ANC members. The greater public is interested as to who becomes a leader in the African National Congress if the African National Congress remains in power as a governing party, because essentially that affects the rest of us. So if one were to somehow get an inkling that perhaps the process is compromised, then it's worrisome even for ordinary citizens.
You see, if you make these allegations, you're accusing that the process that was overseen by branch leaders, overseen by regional leaders,
and then provincial
leaders. You are accusing them that they've manipulated the process.
But perhaps she will submit the proof, because maybe this was just a first communication to say, I do have the proof, and perhaps in days to come she'll be showing you the proof, because we understand that David Mabuza as well has now raised a dispute, his campaign manager.
That's another issue that newsrooms will inform us that Comrade David Mabuza has raised disputes. We don't have a dispute from him. Not at all, not a single dispute. But again, when you raise a dispute, you don't jump the gun and say all sorts of things. You wait for the process and an outcome. Then you can talk. But if you raise this and you don't submit evidence, then you talk too much. It can't be correct. Because you must allow the internal process. You see, in every situation, you must allow the internal process and use internal remedies available to you, so that you can be treated with fairness.
Okay,
but that's
fair
what
enough.
we're appealing to all the members of the ANC to say, let's not have a media festival of contestations. Let us stay within the rules, within the processes. The processes are there. You know, even when this allegation that there are too many disputes, there are not so many disputes, very few disputes that in our assessment will not even make a material difference, even when they are ruled upon. So, and most of them have now been dealt with satisfactorily. Maybe probably 5 outstanding reruns to be done throughout the country. That can be a crisis.
Fair enough. Can we pin you down to a day exactly? When will you be unveiling the 200 additionals?
On Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
All right. So we will be catching up with you on Tuesday once those additional members of the NEC, there will be 80 once it's done. They'll be unveiled.
It's 200. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Chief, for your time this morning. That is the ANC's Electoral Committee Secretary, Chief Livhuwani Matsila.